It only took 7 words to humiliate him. "You don't belong here, little man." In front of a full gate at LAX, 12-year-old Eli Whitmore stood frozen, his first-class ticket torn in half by a flight attendant with a polished name tag and a sharper tongue. No one stood up for him. No one asked if she was wrong. But 6 minutes later, 32 airports would stop boarding, $1.3 billion in transit would freeze, and the very system she thought was blind would blink awake. Because that quiet boy, he wasn't just a passenger. He was the legacy of a man who built the protocol to bring airlines to their knees. The boarding gate at LAX buzzed with the low hum of impatient travelers. Children clutched stuffed animals. Business people typed furiously on tablets, and the loudspeaker repeated boarding instructions in a looping drone. Amid the shuffle stood Eli Whitmore, 12 years old, hoodie zipped up to his chin, glasses slightly crooked, and a navy backpack slung over both shoulders. His first-class boarding pass trembled lightly in his fingers, not from fear, but from the icy air conditioning pouring down from above. He stepped forward when his group was called, ticket extended, voice quiet. "Boarding for seat 2A, he said, looking up at the flight attendant. Deborah Klein glanced at the ticket, then at Eli. Her manicured hand hesitated. Her eyes narrowed. "You're not in first class," she said flatly, her voice louder than it needed to be. Heads nearby turned. "That can't be right." "It's a confirmed seat," Eli said carefully. "My grandmother booked it yesterday." Deborah exhaled through her nose like she was blowing out a candle. She didn't lower her voice, didn't ask him to step aside. Instead, in one swift motion, she tore the ticket clean in half, the sound slicing through the gate's din like a firecracker. "You're not boarding here," she said sharply. "Your kind doesn't fit in seat 2A. Silence rippled out like a dropped stone in a still pond. A woman clutched her purse a little tighter. A man sipping coffee paused mid-sip, murmuring, "Jesus," under his breath. Someone behind Eli fumbled for their phone, screen lighting up as the camera app flicked open. Eli didn't move. The 2 halves of the boarding pass floated to the floor. Deborah motioned with her chin dismissively. "Economy is boarding at gate 18. Go." Eli bent down and picked up the torn pieces, gently sliding them into the front pocket of his hoodie. No tears, no protest, just a small nod, almost imperceptible. He turned. Behind him, whispers began to form in clumps. What just happened? Was that really necessary? Wait, did she just say, "Your kind"? Halfway down the boarding area, a middle-aged man in a blue wool coat leaned over to the woman beside him. "Did she just say Whitmore?" he whispered. "As in Douglas Whitmore?" The woman blinked. "The ethics guy? FAA?" Her eyes flicked to Eli's back as he walked toward gate 18. "That can't be him. He's just a kid." But the name stuck. Back at the podium, Deborah muttered something into her comlink, then glanced around. Her spine was stiff, lips pursed. If she felt the heat of dozens of eyes, she didn't show it. Eli, now on the move, kept his gaze forward. Gate 18 wasn't far, but each step felt heavier. The terminal lights above buzzed faintly. His sneakers squeaked slightly on the linoleum. He passed families, couples, a group of college students laughing loudly. Nobody looked at him. He approached the new gate and showed what remained of his boarding pass. The agent there frowned, then waved him through with a shrug. No one asked questions. Inside the aircraft, he was directed to row 34, seat C, the second to last row, just in front of the restroom. The smell of cleaning fluid still lingered in the air. 2 adults were already seated, one reading a business magazine, the other scrolling through their phone. Neither made eye contact. Eli offered a polite, "Excuse me," and squeezed into the narrow seat between them. His knees nearly touched the seat in front. No window, no working tray. A piece of duct tape held part of the armrest together. He exhaled slowly. The sounds of boarding continued. Overhead compartments slammed shut. A baby cried 3 rows ahead. The flight attendants gave their routine safety briefings, but their voices blurred into background noise. Eli reached into his hoodie pocket and touched the torn boarding pass. Then, deeper, into the inner compartment of his backpack. His fingers found a small, hard rectangle. A slate gray card with no logo. Just a gold-etched inscription. Sky Sentinel Delegate Access. He didn't pull it out, just touched it, remembering. The memory came back like a soft tide. 2 months earlier, his grandfather, Douglas Whitmore, sitting on the back porch in a wool sweater despite the summer heat. "If they disrespect you, don't shout," the old man had said. "Just remember, power waits in silence. Use this only when dignity is denied. Not inconvenience, not discomfort. Dignity. You'll know the difference." The card had come with a sealed envelope. Inside, 6 handwritten digits. A code never meant for public eyes. Douglas had passed 2 weeks later. Eli hadn't touched the card since. Until now. Back in first class, Deborah settled into her jump seat, taking a long sip from her stainless steel bottle. Another flight. Another entitled passenger sorted. She tapped her tablet to check her cruise status. Nothing loaded. Strange. She tapped again, then frowned. The screen blinked once, then froze entirely. Down the aisle, a passenger scrolled through their news app and frowned. "Hey," they muttered. "My app just logged me out." In the cockpit, the pilot received a strange alert. Unrecognized ethics discrepancy flagged. Gate 34C. But none of that had reached Deborah yet. She leaned her head back against the wall and sighed. "Entitled kids," she muttered. "Someone has to teach them the real world." Seat 34C sat in silence. Eli didn't move, didn't even close his eyes. He was waiting, not for revenge, for the system to remember who it was built to protect. The cabin door shut with a mechanical hiss. The world outside faded into a blur of lights and runway noise. Eli Whitmore sat stiffly in seat 34C, the air around him thick with the scent of disinfectant and worn vinyl. The man to his left had already claimed the armrest, and the woman to his right tapped out a quick email on her phone, eyes never lifting. No one spoke to him. No one offered help. He was 12, sitting between 2 strangers who didn't even glance at him. The hum of the plane's ventilation seemed louder than their silence. Eli stared at the seat back in front of him, its fabric slightly torn at the edges. His backpack rested on his lap like armor, zipped tight. Every few minutes he shifted slightly, not to get comfortable, but to feel the weight of the object hidden inside. The gray card, still tucked behind the inner lining. Delegate access, Sky Sentinel ethics, oversight. The name sounded official, maybe even grand, but to Eli, it meant something simpler. It meant his grandfather had trusted him with a secret the world didn't know it still needed. It had been 7 weeks since Douglas Whitmore passed away. He remembered everything about that day. His grandmother had found him early in the morning, still seated at his desk, head bowed over a stack of handwritten notes. The study window had been cracked open, letting in the scent of rain from the garden. A half-drunk cup of chamomile tea sat beside the papers, untouched. The gold pocket watch he always wore lay beside a folder marked Sentinel, Revision B. Eli had stood in the doorway, too stunned to cry. His grandfather had seemed timeless, always calm, always composed, with his gray wool sweaters and quiet voice. But time, apparently, didn't care who built systems or wrote ethics charters for governments. Later that day, after the paramedics had gone, Eli had returned to the study alone. He didn't turn on the lights. The room felt like it was holding its breath. He had approached the desk slowly, fingers brushing the leather chair. The wooden edges of the desk his grandfather had used for over 30 years. That's when he saw it. A plain white envelope, tucked beneath the final draft of a speech titled "The Cost of Silence in Aviation." On it, in dark blue ink, was written, "For EW." Inside the envelope were 2 things. First, the card. Slate gray, smooth edges, with a gold-etched title and a chip embedded at the corner. Second, a smaller folded sheet with 6 numbers, 417298, no explanation, no instructions, just that, and the faint scent of cedar from the drawers. Eli had clutched the envelope to his chest and whispered, "I'm not ready," to no one. His grandmother later told him that Douglas had always believed the Sky Sentinel system was more than just a tool. It was a promise, one that might need to be kept by someone long after him. Now, back on the plane, Eli let the memory settle like dust. He shifted slightly in his seat, and as he did, the woman beside him finally noticed him. "You okay?" she asked, not unkindly. Eli nodded. She paused. "You flying alone?" "Yes." "First time?" "No." Her phone buzzed. Conversation over. Eli glanced toward the front of the plane. He could just barely make out the back of Deborah's head near the jump seat. Her blonde bun was tight, neat, coiled like a spring. His hand moved instinctively to the pocket where the card was hidden. That's when he felt it. Something new. Wedged between the card and the lining was a small slip of paper he hadn't noticed before. His pulse quickened. Slowly, he reached in and slid it out, careful not to draw attention. The paper was no bigger than a ticket stub. Typed letters, not handwriting. "Your grandfather knew they'd try to revoke access. I've reauthorized the card. Keep it safe. J." No signature, no logo, just the single initial. Eli stared at the message, heart thudding. Someone had updated the delegate clearance after his grandfather died? But who was Jay? And how did they gain access to the core system? Sky Sentinel wasn't just a government ethics oversight platform. It was designed to operate independently, free from political interference. Only those with founder-level privileges could authorize override credentials. His grandfather had been the last. Unless... Eli leaned back slowly, mind reeling. Unless he passed it to someone else, just in case. The system had always been built with fail-safes, redundancies layered like security blankets. But a secret reauthorization? That was different. That meant someone else was watching. Someone who believed what Douglas believed. That dignity wasn't negotiable. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane taxied onto the runway. A soft chime played overhead. The captain's voice came over the speaker, smooth and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're number 2 for departure. Estimated flight time is 4 hours, 12 minutes to DC. We expect clear skies. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Eli looked down at the card again, still tucked safely away. He didn't know who Jay was, but he knew what his grandfather would say. The system isn't sacred. People are. When the system forgets that, someone has to remind it. The wheels lifted from the runway. The plane climbed into the night sky. Somewhere below, cities glimmered. Lights blinked across the country. And somewhere inside one of those cities, someone with access had watched that flight, knew that the boy on board was carrying a key that should never have needed to be used. But tonight, it just might. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow as the aircraft climbed steadily into the dark sky. Eli sat still in 34C, legs slightly curled, backpack resting on his lap. All around him, the cabin hummed with the subdued energy of nighttime travel. Faint beeps from seatbelt signs, the occasional whisper between passengers, the metallic rustle of drink carts bumping down the aisle. No one paid attention to the boy in the back row. That was their first mistake. He unzipped the front of his backpack with practiced care, pulling out a small padded pouch, the kind used for travel chargers or pens. Inside, beneath a layer of foam and cloth, lay the slate-gray card, smooth, warm to the touch, etched with a golden phrase barely visible in the dim cabin light. Sky Sentinel Delegate Access. His thumb hovered over the card's embedded chip for a beat longer than necessary. He didn't look up. He didn't sigh. He simply reached into his hoodie, pulled out a compact tablet, custom built by his grandfather, and slid the card into the discreet side port. The screen glowed faintly, and a new interface flickered to life. Something not even most FAA personnel had ever seen. Emergency override, portal, delegate authorization required. Enter authentication to initiate system review and escalation. Eli's breath slowed. His fingers moved carefully, inputting the 6-digit code from memory. 4, 1, 7, 2, 9, 8. The screen blinked, then unlocked. A series of options appeared. Monitor, flag, initiate amber freeze. His thumb hovered, then pressed, initiate amber freeze. A message popped up. Confirm breach of ethical standards? Yes. No. He tapped yes. A soft chime sounded, inaudible to everyone else, but unmistakable to him. The screen dimmed again, then displayed, amber freeze armed. Immediate network propagation pending. Eli tapped one last icon. Video relay, family secure line. The connection took only seconds. His grandmother's face appeared on screen, lit by the soft blue light of her desk lamp back home in Maryland. Her hair was swept up, glasses low on her nose, and behind her, bookshelves lined with aviation policy binders and decades of awards, most of which bore her late husband's name. She didn't gasp, didn't ask why he was calling mid-flight. She simply said, "I'm listening." Eli swallowed. "It happened," he said. Again. That was all. No details, no emotion, but she understood everything. Her eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they were sharper than before. "Did she touch you?" "No." "Did she speak in a way that fits the breach rubric?" "Yes." "Do you feel clear in your decision?" Eli nodded. His grandmother leaned forward. "Then, Eli, this is what it was for. Let the system respond." She didn't need to say goodbye. The screen dimmed. 6 minutes later, 34C remained quiet. Eli didn't check the tablet again. He didn't need to. The protocol would begin its cascade whether he watched it or not. Miles above the Midwest, the aircraft's navigation system pinged softly. Nothing dramatic, just a handshake with the FAA's ethics subsystem. Nothing visible to the crew. But elsewhere, at terminals and towers across the country, something subtle yet seismic began to unfold. At Denver International, a gate agent tapped her screen to assign seats for a connecting flight. The system blinked, then froze. A small red banner appeared. Amber freeze review in progress. Ethics hold pending. In Seattle, a boarding pass scanner stopped reading QR codes mid-swipe. The attendant rebooted the device 3 times before realizing every flight linked to Regal Line, Astrojet, and Trin Air was now showing unverified clearance. At Atlanta Hartsfield, the tarmac crew paused when 2 separate terminals halted boarding simultaneously. Supervisors were called. Phones rang. Back in Chicago, at Sky Sentinel's main operations floor, an intern monitoring the ethics wall sat forward in his chair. I think we just got a delegate-level activation," he said slowly. "Tier A, protocol, amber freeze." His manager dropped her coffee. "No one's used that code in years," she whispered. "Who flagged it?" The intern read from the screen. "Delegate ID E. Whitmore." There was silence. Then phones started ringing. Inside the aircraft, the crew remained unaware. For now. Deborah leaned toward her junior flight attendant and asked, "What's taking so long with the drink orders?" He shrugged. "System's lagging. My tablet won't load seat preferences." She rolled her eyes. "Figures." A man in 3B glanced at his phone and frowned. "That's weird," he murmured. "I just got logged out of my boarding pass app mid-flight." A few rows back, a couple refreshed their airline email confirmation and were met with an error message. "Must be the Wi-Fi," someone mumbled. But in row 34, Eli didn't move. His hands rested quietly on his backpack. His gaze focused straight ahead. He didn't want punishment. He didn't want revenge. What he wanted was acknowledgement. For the system to admit it had failed him. Again. And this time, He wasn't waiting for someone to ask the right question. He had already chosen to be the answer. At FAA headquarters in DC, a red light blinked steadily on the compliance dashboard. A senior officer, Angela Kim, picked up the phone and dialed with urgency. "Get me ops, then legal, then the secretary." "Reason?" her assistant asked. Angela didn't hesitate. "We've just received a live amber freeze flag. Delegate ID Whitmore, child initiated. The system's no longer silent. We need eyes on every gate it touches. 32 airports, dozens of flights, billions of dollars in motion, and one quiet boy in seat 34C, flying east, waiting." Deborah Klein stood at the front galley of the aircraft, lips tight, fingers tapping irritably against the metal edge of the beverage cart. The senior flight attendant had done hundreds of flights. She knew how to manage a cabin, keep smiles plastic and complaints contained. But something felt off. Her tablet wouldn't connect to the crew system. Her messages to the gate staff hadn't gone through. The usual steady stream of updates, seat requests, service alerts, passenger preferences had gone silent. She stared at the screen again. "Retrying connection," it blinked. Her jaw clenched. "System glitch," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. But deep down, Deborah knew better. 30 rows behind her, Eli Whitmore sat motionless, eyes fixed on the faint scratch along the tray table in front of him. The turbulence outside had begun to settle, but inside his mind, something stirred. A memory, half buried but now pulsing with new urgency. It was over a year ago. He had accompanied his grandfather to a closed-door seminar in Washington. The topic was ethics enforcement in high-risk transportation systems, boring to most 12-year-olds. But Eli had loved it. Loved watching the way his grandfather navigated rooms of power with quiet confidence. After the session, they stayed behind for a reception. Government staff, FAA officials, airline executives, suits and name badges and glasses of sparkling water. Eli had wandered between tables listening. That's when he'd seen her. Not in a uniform, no blazer, just a deep green dress and a lanyard marked Industry Liaison. Deborah Klein. She had been standing 2 feet from Douglas Whitmore, her voice low, pleasant. But Eli remembered something strange. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers held a wine glass, but her body was angled forward, just slightly aggressive, like a subtle invasion of space. And then the phrase, soft but unmistakable. "Douglas, we all admire what you've done, but it's important not to make people feel nervous. Systems that scrutinize too deeply make it hard to breathe." His grandfather had smiled, but his eyes had cooled. "I believe systems should make unethical people uncomfortable, Deborah. If you're breathing fine, you have nothing to worry about." The moment had passed quickly, but now, replaying it from seat 34C, Eli understood the undertone for what it was, a veiled warning. Deborah Klein hadn't just been a flight attendant. She had been part of the network, the silent fixers. The term wasn't public, of course, but Eli had heard it whispered in his grandfather's office when discussing cases where misconduct disappeared before it hit policy review. Fixers were those embedded inside the system, not always high up, but placed just right. Gate agents, managers, in-flight staff, people who could report just enough to seem compliant, but bury the rest before it reached oversight. And Deborah, she was one of them. A conduit, a gatekeeper for what wasn't supposed to be seen. Eli's fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. He felt something acidic rise in his throat. Not fear, but something darker. Betrayal. Not just for what had happened to him an hour ago, but what she'd likely done to countless others who couldn't defend themselves, who didn't carry override credentials or know what silence could unlock. How many children had she reassigned with a forced smile? How many elderly passengers had she patronized with policy language until they gave up? How many quiet stories had she buried before anyone had the chance to listen? At the front of the plane, Deborah's earpiece crackled. Finally, she pressed it in, voice low. Ops? It's Klein. Flight 2937 en route to DC. Crew systems are freezing. Getting error pings across the cabin. A pause. Then a male voice, tight and short. Klein, this is above us now. Amber freeze was triggered mid-air. Delegate level authorization. You're under active ethics review. Deborah's blood ran cold. What? Do not approach passengers. Do not initiate any further interactions. FAA liaison will meet you on landing. This is protocol now. The earpiece clicked off. She stood frozen for a beat, then slowly turned to glance back at the cabin. Her eyes scanned the rows. A quiet wave of recognition hit her. Whitmore. She hadn't looked at his boarding pass closely before she tore it. She hadn't cared. But now it all came back. The boy, the name, the grandfather, the one man she'd tried to warn off a year ago, and the child he had passed the torch to. Row 34C, still, calm, watchful. Eli met her gaze across the length of the cabin. He didn't blink, didn't move, just sat there, letting the truth crash over her like pressurized air in a rapid decompression. She turned away, tried to swallow, but the taste of control slipping from her hands was bitter. Worse, she could feel the shift in the air, not turbulence, but something heavier. Passengers checking their phones again. Whispers about delays at other airports. A man in 5D muttering, "My app says our airline's boarding is suspended nationwide. What the hell?" The systems weren't down. They were awake. And the child she'd humiliated had just placed her, no, the entire flight, under the spotlight she'd spent years avoiding. Back in DC, inside the FAA compliance room, the status board lit up with cascading red pulses. 35 active flight holds, 7 flagged terminals, 5 airlines under amber freeze review. Delegate ID E. Whitmore. The protocol had spoken, and the system had listened. The cockpit lights were dim, the autopilot humming along as the aircraft cut a smooth path through the stratosphere. But far below, on the ground, thousands of silent lines of code began to move, triggered not by alarms or sirens, but by a quiet fingerprint. Eli Whitmore sat in 34C, his expression unchanged, though everything was now in motion. The tablet screen in his lap displayed a simple confirmation. Override authorization accepted. Delegate ID E. Whitmore. Status: active propagation. Ongoing. Unlike a missile launch or dramatic system breach in movies, there were no blinking lights, no countdowns, no bold colors. Only a quiet interface that acknowledged receipt of the most powerful code in the entire Sky Sentinel framework. He had entered it manually just moments before. Every digit, 4, 1, 7, 2, 9, 8, typed in with steady fingers. And now, the system responded not with chaos, but with focus. Gates were being quietly locked. Routes paused. Boarding zones suspended. And all of it traced back to a 12-year-old boy with glasses, a frayed backpack, and the last remaining override key in American aviation ethics infrastructure. Back in Maryland, a phone buzzed against polished oak. It wasn't the landline. It wasn't even the secure Sky Sentinel line. It was her personal cell. Margaret Whitmore glanced at the number, an unlisted DC extension. She knew who it was before she answered. "Senator Holcomb," she said plainly before he could speak. The voice on the other end was smooth, almost oily. "Margaret, I was hoping this wasn't the number he used. We had a protocol for this." "We did," she said, eyes narrowing. "Until you let them gut it." "Let's not do this," Holcomb said, with the casual tone of someone used to steering rooms. "I've got every major carrier calling me in a panic. There are billions frozen in the pipeline. Lobbyists are losing their minds. I need you to deactivate the protocol. Just walk it back before it escalates." "Escalates?" she repeated. "Senator, the system hasn't escalated. It's working, quietly, elegantly." "There's a difference between a review and a PR disaster," he snapped. This isn't some rogue pilot or broken tray table. This is your grandson bringing down half the domestic air grid." "No," she said softly. "This is my grandson holding a mirror up to it." Holcomb's tone hardened. He's a child. He doesn't understand the repercussions. He understands exactly what dignity means, which is more than I can say for the CEO's now speed dialing your staff. There was a pause. Then something quieter, more pointed. "Margaret, I don't want this to become political. Don't make me force this through another channel." She smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Try." Click. On board Flight 2937, Deborah Klein sat in the jump seat, staring blankly at her dead tablet. Her thoughts ran faster than the engines. Amber Freeze, Whitmore, that boy, that damned name. She tapped her comm again. "Cabin to cockpit." The captain responded a few seconds later, his voice level but clipped. "Go ahead. What's our status with FAA?" A beat. Then, "We've been advised to maintain altitude and proceed as planned, but we're under silent review. Instructions are to limit passenger interaction. FAA liaison team will meet us on the tarmac in DC." She leaned back, breath shallow. They weren't going to stop the flight, but they were watching. Everything. And she knew what came next. The line-by-line breakdown. Passenger logs. Behavior audits. The crew's biometric response data. Every interaction scrutinized through algorithmic integrity scans. And in that data, her mistake, ripping that boarding pass, uttering those 7 words, "Your kind doesn't fit here." There would be no spinning it. Not this time. In a dark room deep within FAA headquarters, the operations wall now displayed a new window. Delegate override. Active review. Class, Tier 1B. Flagged agents. Initializing Angela Kim, the deputy director, paced slowly. Her team worked in quiet flurries. Secure calls, system checks, satellite link-ups. A young analyst looked up from her monitor. "Ma'am, we just received a note from Senator Holcomb's office. He's demanding to know who reauthorized the override key post-Whitmore Sr.'s death." Angela didn't look surprised. "Tell him it's none of his business." The analyst blinked. "Isn't it technically public oversight?" Angela finally stopped pacing. Delegate override was never supposed to be about public optics. It was built as a last resort. And it was buried deep in the charter because Douglas knew people like Holcomb would try to kill it if they could find it. She turned. Eli Whitmore didn't just activate a code. He activated a memory. One the system forgot it still carried. Back in 34C, Eli closed the tablet gently, sliding it back into the lining of his backpack. The seatbelt sign chimed on again, though there was no turbulence. He looked out toward the aisle. People were growing restless, checking devices, whispering about notifications. Some had noticed their connecting flights had gone pending. Some noticed app errors, but no one knew yet. No one understood the magnitude, and that was fine. They would. Soon. He sat back, his mind returning to his grandfather's final words. "If they come to you with pressure, remember, pressure is only dangerous when you let it tell you what to become. You're not coal, Eli. You're already a diamond. They just haven't noticed yet." He exhaled. Let the world pressure him. The news didn't break. It detonated. At 7:14 p.m. Eastern Time, 30 minutes after Eli Whitmore keyed in the override sequence from seat 34C, a tweet began gaining traction. Posted by a user named @QuietAirTruth, the caption read simply, "This happened an hour ago. He said nothing. She tore his ticket. You tell me what dignity looks like." Amber Freeze, Sky Sentinel number 34. Attached was a shaky but clear video clip, barely 25 seconds long. The camera zoomed in just as Eli stepped forward with his ticket. Deborah's voice, unmistakably sharp, cut through the background noise. "Your kind doesn't fit here." Then came the tear, the audible rip of the ticket, and the wide-eyed silence of the gate. The camera caught Eli bending to retrieve the pieces, his small hands trembling slightly. before he turned and walked away. The clip exploded. By 7:45 p.m., it had been reposted by 5 major news correspondents. By 8:02 p.m., the Atlantic Dispatch published a headline: Whitmore Legacy Ignited. Grandson Triggers Ethics Lockdown on Major Airlines. CNN ran a split-screen special. On one side, the clip. On the other, archived footage of Douglas Whitmore during his 2007 Senate testimony on aviation accountability. Social media lit up with the juxtaposition. He built the system. His grandson just reminded us why it matters. Inside FAA headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Angela Kim stood before the operations map, red pins blinking across national hubs: Chicago, Denver, Houston, Seattle, Miami. Each pin represented a suspended gate, a frozen transit line, a disrupted flow of billions of dollars. An advisor rushed in, holding a tablet. "It's public. The video's viral. We're over 10 million views in 20 minutes. Angela didn't flinch. It was bound to surface. Another officer stepped forward. "We're getting formal inquiries from United Line and Aero Crown. They're demanding cross-investigations into Astrojet's protocol enforcement." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Good. Let them come. Even foreign carriers are watching," someone added. "Emirates just messaged to inquire if this affects U.S. terminal clearances." Angela turned back to the map. "It will. But maybe that's the point." At Astrojet's corporate headquarters in Chicago, panic had set in. Boardrooms once filled with performance reviews and champagne budgets now buzzed with legal teams, PR agents, and a CEO who looked like he hadn't blinked in 20 minutes. Vernon Chase, the man in charge, held a trembling printout of the incident report in one hand and his iPhone in the other. A live feed from Twitter scrolled rapidly. Number 34C isn't just a seat. It's a statement. When a system forgets people, it deserves to be frozen. Eli Whitmore, remember that name? He dropped both devices on the table. "Get Deborah Klein on a secure line," he barked. "Now." "Sir," his assistant said carefully. "She's mid-flight. FAA won't allow any crew interactions during Amber Freeze enforcement." Vernon swore. "Then get me FAA, and somebody find out who the hell leaked that video." At 35,000 feet, Deborah sat rigid, the color slowly draining from her face. The junior flight attendant passed her a crew bulletin slip, hastily printed by the captain. She read the first line aloud, voice cracking. "Passenger recording from Gate 22 incident now live, trending globally." Her fingers tightened on the paper. She didn't need to read the rest. She knew. She had lost control of the narrative. And Eli hadn't even spoken a word. Eli sat still, headphones on but with no music playing. The cabin buzzed around him, oblivious to the storm below. A notification flashed on his tablet screen. He glanced just long enough to catch the headline, "Number 34C trending, FAA ethics review underway." But he didn't smile, didn't smirk. He knew this wasn't a victory. Not yet. The world was finally watching. But what would they choose to see? Back on the ground, the clip reached a new set of eyes, those of law professors, children's rights advocates, and education leaders. Dr. Malia Bryant, a civil rights researcher at Stanford, tweeted, "A child's silence triggered a national systems check. Ask yourself why it took this for people to listen." Eli Whitmore, systemic ethics. At a high school in Baltimore, a teacher paused his civics class mid-lesson. "This is history," he told his students, pulling up the clip. "Watch what happens when dignity refuses to stay quiet." In living rooms across the country, families watched the news. Some cried, some shook their heads in disbelief. Some children stared wide-eyed at the boy on screen, small and still and dignified. And in a quiet house in Maryland, Margaret Whitmore sat with a steaming cup of tea and her laptop open. Her eyes misted, not from pride, but from relief. He remembered. He did it his way. At the final row of the aircraft, Eli looked out toward the aisle, watching the subtle shift in energy. Phones buzzed. Crew whispered. Something invisible but undeniable was spreading. He reached into his bag and touched the edge of the card once more. He didn't need to post. He didn't need to speak. The system was already telling the story, and now, so was the world. The wheels screeched softly as Flight 2937 touched down on the tarmac at Washington National Airport. The cabin jolted gently, the familiar bounce of rubber meeting runway pulling passengers slightly forward in their seats. Some sighed in relief, others stretched, unbuckled, reached for bags. But in 34C, Eli didn't move. His hands rested calmly on his backpack, elbows tucked in. His eyes fixed straight ahead, past the seat back, through the faint reflection on the cabin window beside him. He wasn't waiting to disembark. He was waiting for protocol. In the cockpit, the captain's comm unit chirped. He listened silently, nodded once, then turned to the co-pilot. "They're here. All ready? They've got clearance priority." Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly up beside the jet bridge. A second vehicle flanked it. The logo on the door wasn't commercial. It was government. FAA Compliance Division. 3 figures stepped out, their navy jackets marked with small silver emblems. They didn't run. They didn't flash badges. They simply moved with the kind of certainty that made people pay attention without being told to. Inside the cabin, the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice said, measured and low. "Please remain seated. We've been asked to taxi to a private gate. FAA representatives will be boarding momentarily. Do not disembark until instructed." Whispers surged instantly. Passengers glanced around, questions unspoken but loud in their expressions. Deborah Klein, standing at the front galley, paled. She stepped forward instinctively, eyes scanning toward the rear. She spotted Eli immediately, still, composed, unmoving. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't over. Not yet. The cabin door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air rushed in, followed by the 3 FAA officers. They moved with quiet efficiency, nodding to the captain, bypassing the crew. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and sharp posture, addressed the cabin in a clear voice. "We're here to speak with the passengers seated in row 34C. Mr. Eli Whitmore, please remain in your seats." The reaction was instant. Heads turned. A low murmur rippled down the aisle. The name had been all over the news, and now it was walking among them. In the back, Eli rose slowly. No hesitation. No theatrics. He slid his backpack onto one shoulder, took a step into the aisle, and walked forward. The crowd parted for him. Not dramatically, not reverently, but instinctively. Like they knew something important was passing through. Deborah moved. She stepped into the aisle ahead of the FAA agents, blocking the narrow path just as Eli approached. "I need to speak with the boy," she said quickly. "He's under airline custody until—" "No, Ms. Klein," the lead agent interrupted, her tone firm but polite. "Per Amber Freeze Section 12(4), he's under federal ethics protection. You're instructed to step aside." Deborah faltered. "This is a misunderstanding." A second agent handed her a document. She glanced down and went rigid. "Temporary suspension notice. Ethics breach under investigation." Her name was printed at the top. Her eyes darted back toward Eli. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. As the agents escorted him forward, one of the pilots stepped out of the cockpit to clear space. A tall man, maybe late 50s, with gray temples and the kind of tired but kind eyes only years of flying could carve. His gaze fell on Eli, then narrowed slightly. "You're Whitmore," the pilot said slowly. "Douglas Whitmore's grandson?" Eli nodded. "I thought I recognized you. You were one of the kids at that ethics academy a few years back. DC summer program, right?" Eli blinked. "You gave the closing speech. You said, 'Silence is not the absence of resistance. It's the preparation of it.'" A pause. "I never forgot that." The pilot stepped back, quietly clearing the path. "Fly safe, son." Deborah watched all of it. Every step, every nod. every word she couldn't take back, and she felt it, not rage, not disbelief, but diminishment. For the first time in her career, her authority meant nothing, because it had been built on compliance, not ethics. And this boy had come with something she'd long stopped believing in: accountability. The cabin sat in silence as Eli disappeared through the open hatch. Passengers turned slowly in their seats, whispering with growing intensity. That was him, the Whitmore kid. He didn't even raise his voice. They sent federal agents for a child? Outside, the SUV door opened. Eli climbed in without prompting. The agents followed, closing the door with a soft click. Inside, it was quiet. No interrogation, no stern lectures, only a soft voice from the agent beside him. Your activation triggered a formal audit of 5 major airlines, Eli. Just thought you should know. Eli nodded. I didn't want to break anything, he said quietly. The agent offered a slight smile. You didn't. You reminded it how to work. The Astrojet executive boardroom in downtown Chicago was usually reserved for quarterly investor briefings and champagne-fueled end-of-year parties. Now, it was a war room. The blinds were drawn. Screens glowed with real-time feeds of flight statuses, social media trends, legal briefs, and the red banner no one could ignore. Sky Sentinel Protocol, Amber Freeze active, FAA audit pending. At the head of the table, CEO Vernon Chase slammed his palm on the polished mahogany surface. Someone tell me, he barked, voice low but boiling. Why a kid, a 12-year-old, just pulled the emergency brake on my entire airline? Silence. No one dared answer. He turned toward his compliance officer, Lyle Carter, who looked more like a deer in headlights than the 6-figure lawyer he was. We vetted the crew. We trained them, Vernon growled. So explain how a senior flight attendant ended up front-paging our company on an ethics breach. Lyle cleared his throat. It appears Deborah Klein may have, violated passenger dignity policy. Vernon's eyes narrowed. Violated? She humiliated a child in front of a full gate, ripped his ticket, told him he didn't belong, and then triggered a federal lockdown. Yes, Lyle stammered. But in fairness, she wasn't acting on her own. The room shifted. What did you say? Vernon asked, deadly calm. Lyle swallowed hard. There's email evidence. She was following informal instructions from operations. An internal directive, code-tagged dignitary downgrade. Quietly approved last quarter. Certain names flagged as non-priority, even if they held first-class tickets. Vernon leaned forward, the blood visibly draining from his face. We had a blacklist? Technically, it was framed as a behavior profiling initiative. Which executive signed off? Vernon barked. Lyle tapped on his tablet, pulled up a file, then turned it around. Brian Mallory, he said, VP of Cabin Experience. A long silence followed. Then Vernon slowly stood, towering over the boardroom. Get him in here, now! 20 minutes later, Brian Mallory sat pale-faced, surrounded by executives and lawyers, twisting a pen between his fingers like it might protect him. I never intended... You signed the directive, Vernon cut him off. Yes, but it wasn't meant for passengers like that. It was to reduce liability if someone caused discomfort in the premium cabin. You mean if they looked poor, or too young, or didn't fit your image? Vernon snapped. Brian's mouth opened, closed. You gave Deborah cover, the CEO continued. She didn't act rogue. She acted exactly how you designed her to act. Polite on paper, brutal in practice. There was no defense left. The rest of the board sat in stunned silence. Meanwhile, in D.C., Eli was being quietly escorted through the back halls of the FAA building, not into a conference room, not into a press pit, but into a private lounge. A small space. Just him and his grandmother. 2 cups of tea sat untouched on the table between them. Outside, reporters swarmed the street. Every major network had parked vans across from the glass facade. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights. Inside, a government aide knocked gently and poked his head in. "Mr. Whitmore," he said carefully, "there's a request for an official statement. CNN, MSNBC, even the BBC is asking." Eli looked up, then shook his head. "I have nothing to say." The aide paused. "The public? They've already seen everything they need to." Hours later, the FAA issued its own statement, dry and clinical. Astrojet's internal directive violated Sky Sentinel Charter Protocol 7.1. Discrimination based on unapproved behavioral profiling constitutes an ethics breach. A system-wide audit has been launched. At the same time, independent journalists uncovered the directive Lyle had mentioned, dignitary downgrade. It wasn't buried. It was part of a quiet memo cascade passed around Astrojet's upper-middle management weeks earlier. It included sample profiles, solo minors, non-verbal elderly passengers, unaccompanied special needs travelers, flagged as high friction, and suggested for discreet downgrade if capacity constraints exist. It was all there, on company letterhead, in plain text. The public backlash was immediate. News anchors used the phrase systemic gatekeeping. Editorials declared, "The Sky Sentinel protocol didn't fail. It worked. It just finally had someone willing to press the button." Social media exploded with stories. "My son was moved out of business class last month. Same airline. He has autism. No explanation. I've flown Astrojet for years. Always felt like I was being watched more closely because of my accent. Now we know why." Hubbard 34C became more than a trend. It became a symbol, a warning, a reckoning. In her apartment in New York, Deborah Klein watched the news from a couch that suddenly felt too small. Her phone buzzed again. Voicemail. "Deborah, it's HR. We need to schedule your final exit interview." She didn't press play. Didn't need to. She stared at the TV screen, where a still image from the clip played on loop. Eli, standing at the gate, eyes calm, ticket in hand. The last time she saw that boy, she thought he was small, insignificant. Now, his silence had toppled her entire career, and he'd never even raised his voice. The marble atrium of FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. had never felt more tense. Journalists jostled for space behind the velvet ropes. Cameras lined the perimeter, and officials in Navy suits moved briskly through security. But the real storm was unfolding 5 floors above, inside a conference chamber marked Ethics Oversight Council. On the long central screen, a live feed displayed the logos of every major U.S. airline: Astrojet, Regal Line, Aero Crown, Trinair, Skyline, and more. Beside each logo, a blinking yellow circle, pending compliance update. Angela Kim stood at the head of the room, flanked by legal advisors and digital compliance leads. She cleared her throat. "Effective immediately," she announced to the airline representatives seated before her. "All carriers operating within U.S. commercial airspace are required to re-sign and recommit to the revised Passenger Dignity Charter, now amended as of today's date." The screen flickered again, now displaying the title in bold. The Whitmore Protocol, Federal Mandate Revision 1. 3. Redefining passenger rights under silent breach conditions. The tension in the room thickened. Eli wasn't in the room, but his presence loomed over every word. Behind closed doors earlier that morning, he had sat across from Angela in the senior ethics board. He hadn't come to demand an apology. He hadn't even brought legal counsel. Instead, he brought a proposal, a single-page concept note. At the top, SAFE, Silent Alert for Fair Enforcement. The premise was simple: a built-in, seat-level reporting function for passengers, especially minors or non-verbal individuals, to flag mistreatment without confrontation. A discrete tap system. No alerts. No audio. Just a quiet escalation through Sky Sentinel. Angela had studied the document in silence, then asked, "Did your grandfather design this?" Eli had shaken his head. "He said it was missing, so I built it." Now, in the Ethics Council chamber, Angela turned to the screen. SAFE, will be implemented in tandem with the Whitmore Protocol. Any airline refusing adoption will be temporarily suspended from FAA-approved routes and access to national terminals until re-evaluation. The room erupted. A Regal Line executive slammed his notebook shut. "You can't mandate tech changes mid-quarter. This is billions in retrofitting." Angela didn't flinch. "Then prepare to ground your fleet." A woman from Arrow Crown leaned forward. "And what if we find the function too vulnerable to misuse?" Angela glanced toward her lead engineer, who stepped forward. "The SAFE system uses biometric validation. No fake alerts. It logs patterns over time. It was tested in-house by the boy himself. His prototype outperformed 3 commercial ethics flags already in circulation." Another exec scoffed. "We're supposed to take software from a 12-year-old? Angela's tone cooled. "You're not taking it. You're licensing it. And you're putting his name on every interface. You can thank your corporate negligence for that." By noon, 5 out of 8 airlines had signed. By 2:01 p.m., 2 more caved, after their stock prices dipped on news alerts. By evening, the last holdout, Trin Air, reluctantly agreed after their own internal memo was leaked. A note instructing crew to avoid responding to minor triggered disruptions unless a guardian intervenes. The public outrage made it clear. Resistance was no longer just unethical, it was unprofitable. Eli watched it unfold from a side room at the FAA, sitting cross-legged on a plush armchair, sipping lemonade. His grandmother sat beside him, flipping through a policy packet she helped draft 15 years ago. "You've done more in 48 hours than most ethics boards manage in a fiscal year," she said, not bragging, just stating a fact. "I didn't want this," Eli replied. "I just didn't want it to happen again." "I know," she said gently. "That's why it matters." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Angela Kim stepped in, holding a thin box. She handed it to Eli. Inside was a sleek, matte device, the first production model of SAFE, now integrated into standard seatback hardware. "We thought you might want to name the launch version," Angela said. Eli stared at it, then whispered, "Call it Seat 34C." Angela nodded. "It'll fly next month. First test route, DC to Denver." The next morning, headlines rolled in. FAA mandates ethics tech in historic turnaround. The Washington Post. The Whitmore Protocol, how a boy remapped passenger rights. The Atlantic. From silence to system, Eli Whitmore's quiet revolution. NPR social media picked up the trend. No more yelling, no more begging, just tap, just be safe, #SAFE, #Seat 34C, Whitmore. Protocol videos surfaced of parents explaining the function to their kids before flights. Teachers built lesson plans around digital dignity. Pilots started briefings with, "Welcome aboard, SAFE is active, you are protected." In a staff room at Boston Logan Airport, 2 gate agents read the memo on the break room board. One nudged the other. "Think he even realizes what he's done?" The second agent smiled. "He doesn't need to." Back at home, Eli walked through his grandfather's old study. The dust had settled, but the scent of cedar and leather still lingered. On the desk sat the original override card, now deactivated. Next to it, a new one, this time with his name on it. Not as a reminder of what broke, but of what had been built. The house sat quietly on the edge of a Maryland ridge, its brick walls warmed by the late afternoon sun. Wind moved lazily through the tall grass behind the property, brushing against the windows like distant waves. Eli pushed open the front door, the old brass handles smooth beneath his fingers. The hinges creaked softly, not from disrepair, but from time. Inside, nothing had changed. The scent of cedar and faint papers still lingered in the air. Dust glinted in the sunbeams slicing through the living room blinds. The wooden floor creaked in the same places Eli remembered as a child. He left his backpack by the entryway and made his way down the hall. To the study, his grandfather's sanctuary. The door had never been locked. Yet every time Eli entered, he felt like he was stepping into a sacred place, part library, part memory, part monument. Books lined the shelves in perfect rows, FAA journals, ethics papers, aviation law volumes with faded spines. At the center of it all sat the desk, sturdy oak, polished to a matte sheen by years of use and care. Eli lowered himself into the leather chair, the same one his grandfather used to sit in while sipping tea and reading policy drafts. He rested his hands on the arms, closing his eyes for a moment. Everything was still. He reached toward the bookshelf behind the desk. His fingers paused at a familiar title, Public Trust in Private Skies, one of Douglas Whitmore's most cited works. He slid it from the shelf. The book felt heavier than he remembered. Inside, tucked neatly between chapter 7 and 8, was a folded page of stationery, the same kind his grandfather always used for personal letters. Thick, slightly textured, embossed initials in the top right corner. Eli unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. March 18th, 2023. Eli. If you're reading this, it means the system has tried to forget again. Don't be angry. That's what systems do. They forget people in the margins. They forget those who whisper instead of shout. They forget that silence isn't absence. It's discipline. And that's where you come in. You were never meant to scream. You were meant to wait, to watch, to remember. Because power doesn't flash. It waits. It waits in silence. And then it speaks in action. Today, someone may try to make you feel small. They'll use procedure. They'll use uniforms. They'll use company policy and standard practice. But remember what I told you. The ones who speak in rules are often hiding from responsibility, and the ones who wait are often the ones holding it. Don't try to win arguments. Win moments. And when the moment is right, act. Love you always, Grandpa Eli read the letter twice, then a third time. His throat tightened. Not from grief. He had processed much of that already, but from clarity. The note wasn't generic. It wasn't just wise words scribbled just in case. It was timed, dated, and suddenly, something clicked. March 18th. He reached for his tablet, pulled up the old internal FAA log his grandmother had shown him once, the archive of flagged but dismissed complaints. He searched for the date. One entry appeared, Flight 672, internal ethics concern raised. Later closed. Reporting party, Douglas Whitmore. Eli opened it. The flagged crew member, Deborah Klein. His chest tightened. The report had been short. Deliberate, vague language, clearly filtered by PR. Alleged targeting of passenger for reassignment under informal directive. No official breach confirmed. But his grandfather had known, and he'd seen it coming. That same day, he had written Eli the letter. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. The sound of leaves scratching against the window panes mixed with the slow creak of the house settling. Eli folded the letter again, more carefully this time, and slid it into his journal. He didn't need to reread it anymore. The words had already settled into his bones. He sat there a while longer, letting the silence surround him, not as a weight, but as a shelter. Later that evening, his grandmother joined him in the study, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Eli and sat across from him in the faded blue armchair Douglas once favored. "I found something else," she said softly, reaching into a leather envelope. It was buried beneath some of his papers. She unfolded a yellowing printout, a diagram, simple lines, arrows, blocks of text. It was an early sketch of the SIFE system. Eli's eyes widened. "He started it?" he asked. His grandmother smiled faintly. "Years ago, but he shelved it. Said it wasn't ready, said it needed someone with quieter hands to finish it." Eli looked down. The page felt warm in his lap, like an ember passed forward. "Guess he knew," he whispered. "He always did." In the hallway, the clock struck 8. News anchors across the country discussed the most sweeping aviation ethics reform in decades. Debates raged online. Commentators bickered. Executives scrambled. But in that quiet house on the ridge, none of it mattered. Because the boy who had waited now understood why. And the man who had trusted him had seen it all along. 3 months later, Terminal C at Washington National buzzed with its usual weekday rhythm. Families juggling luggage, solo travelers sipping overpriced coffee, the rhythmic call-outs of gate agents echoing through the bright glass-walled space. But at Gate 12, something unusual was happening. A small crowd had gathered, not for a flight delay or a celebrity sighting, but for a ceremony. No banners, no music, just a simple podium and a single digital screen above Gate 12A. The screen read, "Dedication Ceremony, Seat E34, because silence can land louder than thunder." Reporters stood off to the side, notebooks in hand. Airline staff wore polished uniforms. FAA officials flanked the front row. And in the center, sitting calmly beside his grandmother, was Eli Whitmore. He wore a dark blazer, no tie, hands folded in his lap. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. But everyone knew he was the reason they were there. Angela Kim stepped up to the podium. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Today, we mark a moment in aviation history that didn't begin with a disaster. Not a crash, not a hijacking, but a decision. Quiet, deliberate, and ethical. She glanced toward Eli. A child was wronged. A system was tested. And instead of shouting, he let the tools his grandfather built do the speaking. She gestured toward the screen behind her. As of today, all domestic flights certified under the Sky Sentinel Charter will carry a permanent, unassigned seat, Seat E34. It will remain empty, not out of waste, but out of witness. A reminder that dignity isn't always loud, but it must always be protected. Polite applause filled the terminal. A few tears, too. Eli remained seated. He didn't need to take the stage. His work was already in the air. Across the country, the directive rolled out. New Airbus and Boeing models began boarding with one open seat permanently coded unassignable in the manifest. Flight attendants were trained to explain its purpose when asked. Pilots knew to mention it in pre-flight briefings when children traveled alone. It wasn't just a protocol. It became a ritual. On Reddit, photos began to appear. Snapshots of Seat E34, empty, lit softly, sometimes with a small placard that read, "For the quiet that spoke louder than noise." Some left handwritten notes there. For my daughter, who never had the words. For my dad, who was told he didn't belong. For the boy who reminded us how systems are supposed to work. Others simply touched the headrest in passing, like one might brush fingers across a statue. Twist 9 began with a clip. A school classroom. A girl, no older than 10, stood in front of a projector screen, explaining the story of Seat E34 to her peers. She was calm, confident, focused. "This boy," she said, "didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just did what was right when no one else did. That's what I want to do." The teacher, moved, shared the video on social media. Within days, local news picked it up, then national. Within weeks, that same girl, Janie Ramirez, was invited to speak at a youth policy summit in New York. There, she gave a short speech on dignity rights for children in public systems, transportation, education, health care. It ended with 5 words. Sometimes, courage doesn't shout. Her speech went viral. She was later named a youth ambassador for the International Child Advocacy Network. When asked what inspired her, she smiled and said, "I was on that flight, the day he got moved. I didn't say anything then. I wish I had, but now I can." Eli read about her speech in a quiet cafe, the tablet propped beside a half-finished cocoa. He didn't say anything, but his grandmother, sitting across from him, reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. "She saw you," she whispered, "and you showed her what was possible." At a design lab in Seattle, engineers working on the next generation passenger cabins included a dignity layer in their schematics. a seat-integrated module for safety signals and alerts. They called the framework E34 Core. At an international conference in Geneva, the UN Special Envoy on Children in Conflict cited the SEAT E34 movement as a benchmark for integrating passive dignity into active systems. And in the halls of Astrojet's newly renovated headquarters, the name Whitmore, once spoken in hushed embarrassment, was now engraved into a marble wall near the training center. E34 Initiative, in honor of integrity that refused to be silenced. But the most enduring part? It wasn't the policies, or the plaques, or even the seat itself. It was the shift, the subtle cultural recalibration. Gate agents now hesitated before brushing off a confused traveler. Flight attendants looked twice before defaulting to company policy. Passengers spoke up when they saw mistreatment, not with shouting, but with certainty. And every so often, a child flying alone would glance at their seat back, spot the SAFE symbol, and smile, knowing that if anything happened, the system wouldn't ignore them, because someone had already made sure of that. In a quiet room in Maryland, Eli added one final photo to his journal, a printed image of Janie Ramirez standing at the UN podium, hand resting on a binder labeled Child Passenger Bill of Rights. He didn't write a caption. He didn't need to. The image spoke for itself, just like he once had. It was a quiet Thursday night when the post appeared. No headline, no announcement, no publicist. Just a single upload to an obscure ethics forum maintained by the FAA, a digital space mostly frequented by policy analysts, regulatory auditors, and compliance trainees. The username was simple, E34, and the message just as plain. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I wasn't trying to change laws or shut down airports or make anyone lose their job. I just didn't want to be invisible. I didn't want to feel like I didn't belong in a space I had every right to be in. I didn't want anyone else to feel that either, so I used what I was given. Not to be powerful, just to be heard. The post didn't name names, didn't recount dramatic events, but the subtext carried weight. Every word hummed with lived experience, and in the background of the aviation world, the digital ripples began to grow. Moderators pinned the post, then shared it. By morning, it had been mirrored in internal bulletins across the industry. Soon after, the FAA announced it would include the full message in the introduction to the National Ethics Operations Manual. Chapter 1, Dignity in Practice. At the bottom of the post, one final sentence lingered. Don't underestimate the seat you ignore. Say, in conference rooms from Seattle to Charlotte, ethics officers read those words aloud during training sessions. They asked their teams, what does power sound like when it doesn't raise its voice? What if silence isn't absence, but intention? In classrooms, professors used the post to introduce debates on applied ethics. In media circles, journalists called it the softest mic drop in aviation history. No one ever confirmed who E34 was, but everyone knew, and Eli didn't deny it. He simply let the story live without him, because the work, the real work, was already echoing louder than his name. A month after the post, a new internal memo was sent out to all Sky Sentinel certified carriers. In accordance with the Whitmore Protocol, all employee orientation must include a reading of the E34 reflection prior to any operational duty. At first, some crews rolled their eyes, but over time, the words settled in. During long-haul flights, seasoned attendants began referencing the post when mentoring new hires. Pilots wrote E34 on the back of their crew badges. Gate agents whispered to each other, just remember the seat. Just remember the silence. Meanwhile, Eli returned to life as it was. He walked the same school halls, sat in the same cafeteria, wore the same hoodie. His friends never brought it up. Teachers, if they knew, never mentioned it aloud. But occasionally, a younger student would glance at him with a strange mix of awe and gratitude, like maybe they had figured it out too. Eli never said a word. That was the point. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast golden light across the Whitmore home, Eli sat again in the study. On the desk was a bound copy of the newly updated National Passenger Ethics Charter. His name wasn't in the preface, but his fingerprints were everywhere. He flipped to the last page. There, in italics, was the quote now etched into government halls, training manuals, airline terminals. "Don't underestimate the seat you ignore." He traced the letters with his finger. Behind him, his grandmother entered the room, placing a fresh cup of tea beside him. "They asked again," she said softly. "Asked what?" "If you'd come speak at the policy summit. Share your story." He smiled faintly. "They already have my words." She nodded. "I told them the same thing." A long silence passed between them. Then she added, "He'd be proud of you." Eli didn't answer right away, but finally he whispered, "I didn't do it for pride." "I know," she replied. "That's what makes it matter." In the months that followed, subtle cultural changes began to crystallize. Children were more visibly supported during travel. Anonymous incident reporting rose, followed by a sharp decline in confirmed mistreatment cases. Crew members trained not just in de-escalation, but in silent perception, the art of noticing without waiting for noise. One airline even created a yearly staff award. They called it the E-34 Medal, for those who protected dignity before it had to ask. At a small press conference for Sky Sentinel's 5-year ethics review, Angela Kim was asked what the greatest accomplishment of the program had been. She paused, then said, "A child taught us how to listen to silence, and then taught us how to change because of it." Back in Maryland, Eli stood in the garden behind the house, watching the wind move through the grass. The study window was open behind him, the scent of old books drifting out. He looked toward the horizon, not searching, just appreciating. No words came, none were needed, because he knew now what power really was. Not the loudest voice, not the biggest title, not even the final decision, but the quiet choice made when no one was watching, and the courage to whisper, "No, not this time."